Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook have recently introduced a new system for their social media platform that specifically targets independent, aka conservative, news sources, and I've got a problem with it. Alright folks, fasten your seatbelts for this one. Breitbart News reporting on this. The headline: Mark Zuckerberg explains how Facebook will try to kill alternative media. Mark Zuckerberg recently did an interview with the far-left online publication Vox, where he explained that Facebook's new system of favoring, quote, broadly trusted news sources via a mechanism designed to favor established outlets and crush new media. So this new system, by the way, it was first launched in January, and this is the first time I'm hearing about it, so I'm just venting now. It was launched in January, and essentially what it does is it boosts broadly trusted, those are Mark Zuckerberg's words, news sources on the newsfeed, and at the same time buries news that is independent or alternative. Now the key thing here, folks, is how the phrase broadly trusted news is defined. How do you think Mark Zuckerberg, a far leftist, one could even argue a radical leftist, would define broadly trusted news? Think they define it as Fox News? Conservative Review? Any of those other conservative outlets? No, of course not. Mark Zuckerberg describes broadly trusted news sources as CNN and NBC. Listen to this. Facebook introduced its new system in January, and the results were immediately apparent. Facebook traffic to establishment outlets including CNN and NBC soared upwards, oh surprise, surprise, while traffic to conservative outlets fell. So you see what's going on here, folks. This is no coincidence. It's not like Mark Zuckerberg's just trying out this new system and oops, traffic to CNN and NBC, it went up, but conveniently traffic to conservative news fell. Oops, I didn't mean to do it. No, that's not what's going on. This is an intentional assault on conservative news. They can try to spin it any way they want, but we see the truth. Oh, and in addition, Breitbart News reports that Facebook engagement on President Trump's posts fell by 45%. Coincidence? Let's see. Mark Zuckerberg, again, tried to spin it. Tried to say that, this is all about trying to provide a more meaningful experience for Facebook users. But we know the truth. Now listen to this. Again, this is from his interview with Vox. Zuckerberg said, quote, "This year, we've rolled out a number of changes to Newsfeed that try to boost in the ranking broadly trusted news sources. We've surveyed people across the whole community and asked them whether they trust different news sources." You think that's how it went, by the way? Or do you think there's something that he's not saying? Do you think Mark Zuckerberg and his team reached out to people on Facebook from all across the spectrum and asked them what their favorite or most trustworthy news sources are, and then use that to determine which to, basically create this new system? I doubt that's how it went. Because we know that Mark Zuckerberg and his team are, again, a bunch of leftists. They're ideologues. And it shows time and time again in their business operations. Zuckerberg said, "Take the Wall Street Journal or New York Times. Even if not everyone reads them, the people who don't read them typically still think they're good, trustworthy journalism." Do you read the New York Times? I don't. I don't think they're trustworthy journalism. I don't know where he's getting this from. That people who don't read the New York Times still typically think they're trustworthy journalism? I don't. Are you kidding me? The New York Times, who lies constantly about President Trump, Russia collusion, and so on and so forth. I don't trust the New York Times. Where is he getting this information from? And then he goes on. Whereas if you get down to blogs that may be on more of the fringe, they'll have their strong supporters, but people who don't necessarily read them often don't trust them as much. So let me try to summarize this the best way I can. He's saying that even people who don't read the New York Times typically think that the New York Times is a trustworthy source, which is bull. On the contrary, he's saying that when you have these fringe media outlets, as he calls them, they might have their strong supporters, but people who don't read them, contrary to the New York Times, often don't trust them as much. Again, I don't know where he's getting this from. I doubt there's any research or facts or statistics to back this up. I think this is all coming from his empty head. Folks, this is really part of a bigger problem because it's not just Facebook that is out there now trying to censor conservative news, specifically targeting conservative news outlets. This is a pattern. This is a pattern that we're seeing over and over and over again on sites like Twitter, Google, and YouTube. It's becoming rampant on the internet. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that the internet is becoming increasingly hostile to conservatives. It's absolutely true. I encourage you to do your own research. I mean, I could spend hours on this topic, but these are shorter videos. I can't do that right now. Look it up yourself. Look it up yourself. And lastly, I would say this. If conservatives lose the internet as a platform to speak out, as a platform to advance our message, where else are we going to turn? Where else are we going to turn? You look at the mainstream media, dominated by leftists. You look at Hollywood, dominated by leftists. You look at the classroom, colleges and universities, dominated by leftists. The internet increasingly becoming dominated by leftists. So I'm saying, if we lose this platform, where do we go as conservatives to speak out? Where do we go? What do we do? This censorship, this blatant censorship of conservative voices on the internet, whether it comes from Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter, YouTube, I don't care. It has to stop.